Chapter 567. Give me one. Yang Chendong reached out and took a triangular anchor from Chiovi's hand. He weighed it in his hand. Young master, you can't take the risk. While Chiovi was still in a daze, Tiger's Mane strode over and tried to stop Yang Chendong. After all, no one thought that the sixth young master would personally take action. What? Are you looking down on me? Yang Chendong tied one end of the rope to his waist and casually glanced at Tiger's Mane. However, it was this calm attitude that shocked Tiger's Mane. He had been with the young master for too long. No one knew better than him what his words and actions represented. Sometimes, the calmer he appeared, the more it proved that he was really angry. Tiger's Mane didn't dare to say anything. Chiovi didn't know about this. He stepped forward and said, "Sixth young master, you can't go to the front line as a member of the assault team." As he said that, he tried to untie the rope that was already tied to his waist. A strong force suddenly hit Chiovi's shoulder. He couldn't help but take a few steps back and almost fell to the ground. This also made his eyes reveal a horrifying expression. When training became a habit, even standing there would be rooted to the ground. As the captain of the first guard team, Chiovi was naturally skilled. However, the sixth young master only casually bumped into him and he almost fell to the ground. It wasn't that his lower body was unstable, it was just that the sixth young master was too strong. After showing his position in action, Yang Chendong looked at the other guards who still wanted to persuade him and said, "If any of you can beat me in a one-on-one, then you can stop me. Otherwise, don't say anything." What kind of joke was this? The entire first guard squad wasn't a match for Yang Chendong even if they joined forces, yet he still dared to challenge him to a duel. Based on this sentence alone, everyone fell silent. Beta Persei, who hadn't reacted until now, lowered his voice and grabbed a triangular anchor. He wanted to show his support with practical actions. He wanted to be in the first echelon with the young master. After Tiger's Mane reacted, he grabbed the triangular anchor to show his determination. "Okay, you're so heavy. Aren't you afraid that the rope can't hold you? If you want to go up, you'd better be in the second echelon." Other than Beta Persei being too heavy and not suitable for this kind of flexible work, the captain of the first squad, Chiovi, the captain of the second squad, Daoist, and several vice-captains and squad leaders grabbed the triangular anchor respectively. They wanted to show their determination to support the sixth young master with practical actions. "Very well, hurry up. I hope you won't be a burden to me." After making a joke, Yang Chendong began to exert his strength. With a wave of his hand, the triangular anchor in his hand flew toward the top of the city wall as if it had grown eyes. Soon, it was stuck at the junction of the battlements. He pulled hard on a climbing rope. After making sure that it was secure, he stretched out his feet and stepped on the battlements. His arms continued to exert strength, and his feet moved quickly. His whole body flew straight up the battlements like a monkey. So fast! Although they were mentally prepared, when they saw Yang Chendong's figure quickly disappear in front of them, the guards couldn't help but let out a sigh. "What are you waiting for? Hurry up." Tiger's Mane also looked at the battlements with everyone's gaze, but he quickly remembered his mission and threw the triangular anchor up the battlements. For a moment, the triangular anchors flew up rapidly as if they had grown eyes. Yang Chendong was the first to climb up the battlements with the help of the climbing rope. His speed was as fast as a fox, making it difficult for people to catch his speed. After jumping up the southern battlements, he flew toward a dark corner. His appearance didn't attract anyone's attention. He took a deep breath and calmed his breathing. His hand reached for his waist and a military knife appeared in his hand. Soon after, his figure flew out like a swallow in the clouds. His footsteps were extremely fast as he rushed towards a Lansong soldier who was walking around with a torch in his hand. His feet didn't make the slightest sound as he stepped on the ground. At this moment, he was like a ghost, appearing and disappearing unpredictably. When he arrived behind the enemy soldier, he still didn't raise the enemy's guard. He raised his right arm and quietly placed the stiletto on the soldier's neck. His left hand covered the soldier's mouth and pulled back, causing blood to splatter everywhere. Ugh! He instinctively wanted to struggle, but how could he be Yang Chendong's opponent? This Lan Kingdom soldier's legs only forcefully kicked twice before his aura became weaker and weaker. After a breath of time, his head tilted to the side, announcing his death. After killing the nearest enemy, Yang Chendong reached out and took the torch from the other party. He stood up fearlessly and began to patrol the area just like the soldier before. However, his eyes continued to flicker as he imprinted the situation of the enemies in his mind. Then, he began to analyze and make judgments. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Tiger's mane and the others also climbed up the tower and came to a dark corner beside Yang Chendong. Without turning his head, Yang Chendong's left hand, which was behind his back, constantly made hand gestures, telling Tiger's mane and the others the exact location and number of enemies. You guys go to the left, you guys go to the right. The rest of you follow me. After Tiger Mang saw Yang Chendong's hand gesture clearly, he continued to make arrangements. One by one, the guards who had climbed up the tower began to disperse, each of them searching for their own targets. The Lansang soldiers were completely unprepared. They didn't think that someone would ambush them. They were still walking around the tower. Occasionally, they would stop and chat to pass the time. In the face of such unprepared opponents, the guards were like dragons that were born. With the stabbing of their bayonets, the enemies were silently killed one by one. Every time one of them died, the torch in their hands would be replaced by another guard. In less than half an hour, almost 50 enemies on the south gate were all killed. From the beginning to the end, not a single sound was made. It was obvious how strong the guards were. Young master, we have them under control. Tiger's mane broke the neck of the last enemy in his hands and walked to Yang Chendong's side. Okay, leave one squad here to guard. Let them open the south gate and send more troops in. The rest of you, follow me to the east gate tower. Yang Chendong said calmly as if they had just killed a few stray dogs and not a few dozen human lives. Everyone held their torches and walked from the southern gate tower to the eastern gate tower in an open manner. Walking at the front was Yang Chendong. Taking someone by surprise would often lead to unexpected results. Perhaps no one would have thought that a person who launched a sneak attack would dare to appear so brazenly. Yang Chendong grasped this mentality. Once he got close to the enemies, they wouldn't have time to react. Why are those people coming from the south gate tower to us? What are they doing? A group of dozens of people holding torches was quickly approaching. Finally, they attracted the attention of the guards on the east gate tower. However, they were only paying attention. Everyone was just curious. No one thought that they were enemies. 30 meters, 20 meters, 15 meters, the distance was getting closer and closer. With the help of the light from the torches, the faces of both sides could be seen clearly. The guards also held their bayonets tightly and were ready to attack at any time. However, at this moment, a gunshot suddenly came from the west gate tower. A ray of light appeared. In this dark night, it was so eye-catching and so clear. When the gunshot rang out, Yang Chendong knew that something was wrong. Wu Sheng's whereabouts must have been discovered and they had no choice but to use their guns. Since they were already discovered, there was no need to hide anymore. Yang Chendong fiercely threw the torch forward and immediately put away the military knife. Instead, he took out the Type 95 submachine gun that he carried on his back. Da-da-da-da-da. Without giving the enemies any time to react, Yang Chendong raised his gun and fired. Relying on his sharp senses and proficiency with firearms, every time a bullet was fired, an enemy holding a torch would fall to the ground. Attack! Behind him, Hu Mang and the others were only half a beat slower before they raised their guns and fired. Instantly, gunshots rang out, and the enemies in front of them were all annihilated in less than 3 breaths of time. Go to the north gate tower. Yang Chendong raised his left hand and made a forward motion. Then, he took the lead and rushed out. In terms of elite level, these guards who spent every day with the 6th young master were constantly trained. Especially with Yang Chendong's personal strength getting stronger and stronger, they were not willing to continue being punching bags. As the saying goes, the greater the pressure, the greater the resistance. The guards would train whenever they had time and strive to break through their personal limits. Leading such a team was really successful. On the North Gate Tower, there were only bursts of gunshots. There were no casualties and dozens of enemies were killed on the ground. Wu Sheng and the company under his direct command had just finished off the enemies on the West Gate Tower. The enemies on the South, East, and North Gate Towers were all wiped out. Close the 4 cities. Don't let the enemies escape. Yang Chendong, who gave the order, had a cold expression on his face. It was obvious that he was really angry at this moment. After the order was given, the 3 regiments of Cold Vanguard outside the city were divided into 4 groups. They guarded the 4 city gates respectively. Then, they began to push from the outside to the inside. The 3 of them formed a group. Under the 3-on-3 tactic, the unprepared enemies fell to the ground one after another. Many of them did not understand what had happened until the moment they died. How could there be enemies behind them? The news that the 4 city gates leading to the outside world had fallen quickly reached the ears of the commanding general, Ceci. Chapter 568. That's impossible. After hearing the news, Sai Sha, who had just fallen asleep, immediately sat up on the bed and wiped his face forcefully. Obviously, he wanted to see if he was still dreaming. Perhaps he rubbed his nose too hard, but Sai Sha had no choice but to face the reality. How many enemies are there? Have you figured it out? General, there are a lot of enemies. Their firepower is very strong. Our brothers couldn't stop them at all. The captain who came to report said with a sad face. How can there be so many enemies? We have only been in Hanoi for 3 days. Even if there are reinforcements, they couldn't have arrived so quickly. Also, didn't you say that not even a bird flew out when the city was surrounded? How did the news get out? Sai Sha's face was full of doubt and confusion. Seeing that Sai Sha was still thinking about these things, the captain said anxiously, General, now is not the time to look into these things. You should decide what to do next. Should we take advantage of the fact that the enemy hasn't formed a favorable encirclement and kill our way out? It was no wonder that the captain was so timid. Previously, when they said that they were going to be enemies with the mercenaries, their hearts were beating like drums. It was only when they really entered Hanoi City and suppressed the mercenaries that they could finally relax. Especially when they knew that the number of mercenaries that were surrounded was very small, and they didn't have many elites. They really did have the idea of eliminating the mercenaries. But now, the main force of the mercenaries had appeared. From the short battle, there was no doubt that they were the elites of the elites. In the first 3 days of fighting, they had lost nearly 30,000 soldiers. Now that they had to face the main force of the mercenaries, how could they not be afraid? The captain's face was full of fear. When Sai Sha saw it, he couldn't help but curse in his heart. This time, he came to Hanoi with the intention of making a name for himself. Now that his army had suffered such heavy losses, if he still couldn't conquer this place, even if he managed to escape, wouldn't he be laughed at by others? No, we can't retreat. There aren't many enemies left in the commercial street, we must rush in. As long as we occupy that place, we can obtain countless gold and silver, and even advanced firearms. That way we will have a foothold. As long as we can defend the place, the news will spread quickly, and reinforcements will arrive. When that time comes, we can attack from both sides. No matter how strong the mercenaries are, they won't be able to defend themselves. That will be the time for us to make a great contribution. As expected of a ruthless general. Not only did he not run away in the face of Lung Feng's attack, he even chose to fight to the death. This seemed to have inspired the major commander, who also saw some hope. General, can we really do it? Why not? We still have more than 40,000 people. Even if we discount them, we still have 20,000 people left. Can't we defend the business district? At that time, we will also have the firearms of the mercenaries. What will we be afraid of? Cece said viciously. He then walked out of his bed and called for a group of guards to carry out a new plan of attack. On the watchtower, Lu Jian was sleeping with a Type 95 class machine gun. He needed to rest up and prepare for the battle at dawn. Suddenly, the sound of gunfire from afar woke him up. He took out his binoculars and looked into the distance. His face lit up. It's the reinforcements. The reinforcements have arrived. Really? Governor Song, who also heard the gunshots, rushed to the top of the building just in time to hear this sentence. That's right. The reinforcements must have arrived. But I don't know if they are the main force of the sixth young master's Lung Feng. Lu Jian said with uncertainty. After all, it had only been 2 days since the telegram was sent. How could they arrive so quickly? Speaking of which, if the telegram wasn't out of power, they would have received the telegram from Yang Chendong. No matter who they are, as long as they are reinforcements, they are our hope. But we still have to prepare for the worst and prevent the enemy from launching a fierce attack. Xianxia couldn't be sure that the reinforcements were the main force of the sixth young master and the Lung Feng. But no matter what, there was still hope. Just as Xianxia finished speaking, one of the Lung Feng soldiers said, "The enemy is gathering. It looks like they are really going to launch a fierce attack." Xianxia and Lu Jian heard this and came to the window. They looked down and saw the soldiers of the Longtime kingdom gathering. The two of them looked at each other in silence. Their expressions didn't look too good. But some things were already here. It was useless to be afraid. Xianxia said to Lu Jian, "Platoon leader Lu, I will have to trouble you. Please try your best to stop the enemy. I will go down and inform the other units to prepare for a full counterattack." "Thank you, Governor Song." Looking at Xianxia's bloodshot eyes, Lu Jian felt sorry for him. He hadn't slept for 3 days. The auxiliary soldiers, temporary auxiliary soldiers, and the Vietnamese mercenaries in the commercial street were all mobilized. More than 5,000 people gathered together. This was their last force. Victory or defeat depended on this. Just as the street was ready, the Lan Song Kingdom soldiers sounded the attack horn. In the dark night, countless enemies rushed over with swords, spears, and clubs. Perhaps they knew that this was their last hope. The speed of these soldiers was faster than before. Attack, don't be afraid of wasting bullets. Attack with all your might. On the watchtower, Lu Jian held the 12.7mm heavy machine gun and kept pulling the trigger. Bullets flew out rapidly. The shells that came out of the chamber quickly formed a layer on the ground. Beside him, a few of the Lung Feng soldiers also worked together and used their machine guns to sweep the ground. At the same time, the Lan Song Kingdom soldiers also fell to the ground. After 3 days of continuous fighting, the number of iron shields in the enemy's hands was very low. It was difficult for them to block the bullets of the machine guns. However, the Lung Feng soldiers were too few in number. In the end, many of the soldiers still managed to rush into the commercial street. Attack! The auxiliary soldiers hidden in various places held Type 81 rifles and spat out tongues of fire. The first enemy soldiers who rushed in were turned into corpses. However, the enemy's numbers were too many. No matter how hard they fought, they couldn't break through. In the end, the enemy soldiers rushed in just like that. "Brothers, follow me and kill." With a loud shout, he took the lead and charged out with his blade. Behind him, there were thousands of soldiers and Vietnamese mercenaries, and they let out loud shouts as they clashed with the soldiers of the Lan Song Kingdom, unfolding the cruelest and most cold-blooded hand-to-hand combat. Sides clanged, swords hacked, spears stabbed, axes and hooks hacked. Soon, the place became a purgatory. Blood, broken limbs, and corpses were everywhere. The Lung Feng 3rd Regiment was like a ferocious tiger rushing down the mountain from the city gate towards the center of Hanoi City. Following them were tens of thousands of educated youths from Chichen City. Of the 50,000 youths who were sent here at the beginning, there were only about 10,000 of them left in Hanoi City. When the battle broke out, they tried their best to hide. Although they were unarmed and wanted to kill the enemy and serve their country, they knew their mission and responsibility. Without a plan, they would only be courting death if they rushed out. When the Cold Vanguard Regiment appeared, they quickly gathered together and followed behind the Cold Vanguard Regiment. They took all kinds of weapons from the dead enemy soldiers and charged towards the commercial street with the Cold Vanguard Regiment. At the front of the charging army, Yang Chendong took the lead. Every time he fired a shot with the 95 style, an enemy would fall to the ground. With the existence of that qi, his perception was at least 3 times stronger than that of an ordinary person. These advantages made him like a fish in water. In just a short while, the number of enemies who had died at his hands had exceeded 100. "Young master, slow down. Young master, be careful. Tiger's mane followed behind Yang Chendong with 2 guards. A gentleman would not stand under a collapsing wall. Logically speaking, Yang Chendong should not be allowed to participate in such a chaotic battle. However, none of them could catch up to the 6th young master. All they could do was follow closely behind and strangle all dangers in the cradle. This slowly turned them into a sharp knife, stabbing directly into the enemy's heart. Behind them was the main force of the Lung Feng 3rd Regiment. Commander Wu Sheng was already sweating profusely. Previously, when they were attacking the city, they were accidentally discovered by the enemy and had no choice but to take the initiative to fire. Even so, they only managed to take down the west gate of the 4 city gates. The battle for the city gates was already over. This made Commander Wu Sheng very depressed. However, they were still left in the dust by the 6th young master in the battle inside the city. As a self-proclaimed elite, he could not accept this. He yelled and urged the Cold Spear warriors to speed up, turning into a torrent that charged straight into the city center. Whether it was Yang Chendong's troops or the 2nd Regiment of the Lung Feng, they were all too fast. They were so fast that the Lansang Kingdom soldiers did not even have time to form an effective defensive line before they killed their way over. Then, they broke their formation and forced countless enemies to flee. Those who were too slow to run simply threw down their weapons and knelt on the ground. Yang Chendong passed by the spineless and kneeling surrendered soldiers and continued to lead the charge towards the commercial street near the palace. Behind Yang Chendong were a few dozen guards. Although they tried their best, they realized that they were getting further and further away from the 6th young master. Behind the guards was the 3rd Regiment of the Lung Feng led by Commander Wu Sheng. In comparison, although they tried their best, they were still at least 300 to 400 meters away from the guards. Behind them were the educated youths from Chichen City. At this moment, they finally had a chance to use their skills. The work of reorganizing the kneeling captives would be done by them. Chapter 569. The gunshots never stopped from night till dawn. When a white light slowly rose from the horizon, Yang Chendong was already 1 kilometer away from the commercial street. It was obvious that there was a group of people shouting here. After dodging to a corner, Yang Chendong took a deep breath. Then he loaded a new magazine with the Type 95 in his hand. He couldn't remember how much ammunition he took out from the warehouse. Young master. During this pause, Tiger's mane and the others finally caught up. Then, they leaned against the corner to rest. This night, they had been killing enemies and chasing after the 6th young master. They didn't feel anything before, but now that they had a chance to rest, the fatigue immediately filled their bodies. How is it? Very tired, right? Bear with it, the battle will be over soon. Yang Chendong's gaze swept over the team members and revealed a smile. Yang Chendong had been charging at the front line all this time. He should be far more tired than the others. In particular, his perception had always been in a very tense state. Because of the existence of the key, he felt tired, but it wasn't that strong. On the contrary, he could feel that the key was stronger than before, and even faintly felt that it was getting bigger. This made Yang Chendong very curious. He wanted to know if there was a limit to this key, and where the limit was. The other team members didn't know what the 6th young master was thinking. After receiving encouragement, everyone's fatigue suddenly decreased by half. Each of them puffed out their chests, showing that they could still fight. Okay, check your weapons and equipment, and prepare for a surprise attack. Yang Chendong's eyes were smiling. It was as if they weren't going to kill people, but to have fun. After fighting for a night, the team members didn't have many bullets left. They weren't like Yang Chendong, who owned a large warehouse and had the world's largest arsenal behind him. But the remaining bullets were no problem for a round of attack. All right, let's count to 5 and charge together. Seeing that all the soldiers were looking at him with inquiring eyes after checking their weapons, Yang Chendong suddenly said with a heroic spirit, When Yang Chendong counted to 2, his figure had already stood up. With the word charge, he was the first to appear on the main street. Then, the 95 style in his hand spewed out a tongue of flame, directly killing the enemies on the street behind him. This enemy troop was General Sexi's headquarters. He was reprimanding the captains and kiliarchs under his command as the battle was going badly. Who would have thought that an enemy would suddenly appear behind him? Da-da-da. Gunshots rang out one after another, and the unprepared Longtime soldiers fell to the ground like sliced chives. The gunshot attracted Cece's attention. What's going on? In fact, if it weren't for the fact that they were physically exhausted, they would have followed behind Yang Chendong. Cece naturally didn't know that he had been targeted. When he left a group of people to guard the place, he thought that he was already safe. So when he walked to another street with nearly 100 of his personal guards, his originally nervous heart had already relaxed. It was early in the morning, and the battle in the commercial street had already lasted for 3 days. The people in the vicinity had already fled. On a relatively spacious street, there was only Cece and nearly 100 of his subordinates. This time, we were unlucky. The mercenaries came just in time. But it doesn't matter. After this battle, at least we know that they are not invincible. After I leave the city and regroup, they definitely won't be so lucky the next time they come. Cece's face was unconvinced. It seemed like he was cheering for his subordinates, but it also seemed like he was cheering for himself. While walking, Cece said this. That's right. With the general's divine power, even the mercenaries are no match for you. Immediately, a personal guard flattered him. Haha. Hearing the flattering words of his subordinates, Cece laughed and completely forgot that he was scared shitless when he saw the mercenaries. This army that didn't look like a failure at all was actually laughing at this time. It looked so discordant. At this moment, an even more discordant voice exploded above their heads. Bah! It's just a group of clowns. How dare they boast so shamelessly? Who is it? Who is it? Where is he? As soon as they heard the reprimanding voice, Cece and the others quickly looked over and saw Yang Chendong standing on a 5-meter-high roof. Of course, they didn't know who Yang Chendong was. But they could see that the opponent was only one person. Although this person was holding a firearm that they had never seen before, 100 people against one person still gave them enough courage. You're only one person and you still dare to show your face. You really don't know how to write the word death. Come, let's attack together. Cece's eyes flashed with a fierce light. His gaze was more focused on the firearm in Yang Chendong's hand. He thought that this battle was already over, but if he could snatch an advanced firearm, then this trip would be worth it. The fact that 100 people could fight one person gave the other personal guards a great deal of confidence. After receiving the general's order, they clamored and surrounded the rooftop. You don't know the meaning of death. Yang Chendong stood on the rooftop like a god. Looking at these people with swords and spears who wanted to surround him, his eyes flashed with a strong murderous intent. Then he raised the gun and fired at a few personal guards who were climbing up the rooftop. Bang! A loud sound was heard, followed by the sound of a small landmine explosion. The pitiful personal guards who were climbing up the rooftop didn't even know what was going on before they were blown away. The personal guard who was hit by the gun was directly blown into pieces. His flesh and blood splattered everywhere. Yang Chendong was holding a shotgun in his hand, and it was the latest model. The power of a small cannonball was not just for show. When this shot was fired, the range of the shot encompassed a radius of 4 to 5 meters. How could swords and spears block this shot? One shot actually had such a shocking effect. Cece's mouth suddenly opened so wide that an egg could be stuffed in. It could be seen how shocked he was at this moment. The other personal guards weren't any better. A few personal guards who wanted to climb up the rooftop in another direction suddenly stopped their actions. Then they stood there helplessly, not knowing what to do. They didn't know what to do, but Yang Chendong could teach them. They saw the muzzle of the gun turn, and the next shot was already in front of them. Bang! A large hole appeared on the rooftop. Naturally, no one who stood there was lucky enough to escape. If they weren't dead, then they were injured. Oh my God! The power of the shotgun scared them. After seeing the power of 2 shots, none of the personal guards thought of taking Yang Chendong's life. On the contrary, each of them quickly found a place to hide. At this moment, Yang Chendong, who was alone, was not a soft persimmon to be pinched. He was like a fierce tiger in the forest, opening his mouth and swallowing their lives. Chapter 570. Pang pang pang. Shot after shot, hitting the bodyguards who were running in all directions. One bodyguard after another fell to the ground, screaming and wailing, giving people a feeling of fear. What kind of weapon is this? Xianxia rushed into a house under the protection of a few bodyguards. At this time, he was in a very sorry state, his face full of fear. Just now, he had seen with his own eyes that 3 personal guards were hiding behind a thick wooden plank. However, when the gunshot rang out, a large hole was blasted in the wooden plank. The 3 people who were hiding were also blasted 3 to 4 meters away. This kind of powerful lethality completely defeated his arrogance. At this time, he only had one feeling, and that was to quickly escape from here. Otherwise, he really didn't know where he would be safe at this time. Ping, ping, pung. The sound of gunshots and explosions were endless, one after another. After the first explosion, there were always a few screams, which meant that more bodyguards were shot and died, or were seriously injured and lost the ability to fight. General, what do we do? A guard asked Cici with a pale face. His trembling legs represented his fear and nervousness at this moment. Think of a way to rush out. After all, he is only one person. Xianxia was also frightened, but after all, he was a general, so he was able to quickly calm down. It was just that he was already very restrained, and no longer wanted to take Yang Chendong's life like before. The advanced firearms were already a headache, and this could be seen from the daily battle casualties that reached almost 10,000. Not to mention the cannons, the difference of one word meant that it was indeed an existence that could not be surpassed. Just in terms of momentum, the shotgun was already far superior to the 81 rifle and the 95 style. Let's split up and rush out. Xianxia forced himself to calm down and tried to make his voice sound calm, then pointed at the 3 bodyguards beside him. You 3 run out in different directions, the others follow me. You have to remember, he is only one person, and it is impossible for him to shoot at all of you at the same time. The personal guards were used to obeying the general's orders, especially when they thought that there was only one enemy. If they fled in all directions, their chances of survival should be very high. A few personal guards looked at each other and nodded before rushing out of the house in different directions. Yang Chendong, who had already put away the shotgun, took out a Type 95 5.8mm machine gun from the big warehouse. The gun's empty weight was 3.95 kilograms, 840 millimeters long, 600 m shooting range, and was fed by a 75-round drum. Compared to the shotgun that could only hold 6 rounds, this Type 95 machine gun's performance was a bit more powerful. The only difference was that it was not as powerful, but in front of the bodyguards were already scared out of their wits. It was nothing. Just as he reloaded a new magazine, he saw someone rushing out of the house. A cold light flashed in Yang Chendong's eyes. How could he be polite? He shot out a few shots, and the 3 guards who were fleeing in 3 different directions fell to the ground with a plop. Rush out! Xianxia heard the sound of gunfire outside and knew that his chance was here. He yelled and brought the only 3 bodyguards with him out of the house. But right after he rushed out, he clearly saw the bodyguards' bodies on the street, including the 3 bodyguards who just rushed out. Xianxia instinctively stopped and looked up at the roof. What he saw was Yang Chendong holding a Type 95 machine gun with a face full of killing intent. 222. After a few shots, the remaining 3 bodyguards fell backwards. If you looked closely, you would see that they were all shot in the forehead. For a machine gun to be able to hit the bullseye, it could be seen that Yang Chendong's familiarity and accuracy with guns had reached a new level. With a putong sound, Xianxia also knelt on the ground. Different from the other bodyguards, his legs were shot. The powerful penetrating force of the machine gun shattered his leg bones, causing him to lose the ability to stand up. General! Shouts came from the houses on the side of the street. Some bodyguards rushed out as if they didn't care about their lives. Personal guards were indeed personal guards. Their loyalty to the general was many times higher than that of ordinary soldiers. But the reality was that their actions were completely useless. They could only become souls under the gun. 222. The muzzle of the gun spat out a tongue of fire. Then, the bodyguards fell to the ground one by one. None of them could reach Xiaoxi's side. Seeing everything that happened, Xiaoxi forgot about the pain in his legs. Because at this moment, his heart was in even more pain. The moment he mustered the courage to look up, he saw Yang Chendong standing on the roof like a devil. He made people feel a deep fear from the bottom of their hearts. The gunshots finally stopped, and the whole street instantly became quiet. None of the bodyguards were alive. The only ones who could breathe were Yang Chendong standing on the roof and Xiaoxi who was trembling on the ground with bleeding knees. Young master. Tiger's Mane and the others finally appeared. When they saw Yang Chendong on the roof safe and sound, they couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. Then they were deeply shocked. They were frightened by the scene in front of them. The street was full of corpses, and there were nearly 100 of them. Was all done by the sixth young master? Badao Jiang said as he couldn't help but gulp. 1 against 100. Although they had the advantage of advanced firearms, it wasn't something they could do. That should be the enemy general who caused trouble for us this time. Capture him and we'll have a public trial later. Right, bandage him up. We can't let him die so quickly. Jumping down from the roof, Yang Chendong walked to Tiger's Mane and Beta Persei. At the same time that Xiaoxi was captured, in front of the commercial street, because of the appearance of the guards and the 3rd Regiment of the Cold Front, the Lansong soldiers here were first defeated, then kneeled and surrendered in front of the powerful forces. The crisis of Hanoi City was resolved. At the entrance of the commercial street, Yang Chendong stood there and looked at the mess in front of him. On the commercial street after the war, some guns were completely smashed, and machine gun parts were scattered all over the ground. The bodies of the martyrs were in various positions. Some were hugging the enemy's waist, some were hugging the enemy's head, some were choking the enemy's neck, some were pressing the enemy to the ground, and some were burning together with the enemy. There was also a soldier who was still holding a grenade in his hand. His body was covered in brain matter. The brains of the Lansong soldiers who died with him were splattered all over the ground. Another soldier was holding half of the enemy's ear in his mouth. When they buried the bodies of the martyrs because their hands were interlocked, they hugged the enemy so tightly that some of their fingers were broken. The cruel side of the war was finally revealed. In this battle, a platoon of the Cold Front soldiers had lost 6 people, and more than 10 were injured. Of the 2 battalions of auxiliary soldiers, only 1 company was left standing. Of the 6 temporary auxiliary battalions, only 1 battalion survived. Of the 10,000 Vietnamese mercenaries led by Hong Jin, only less than 1,000 were left. This battle was the worst loss the mercenaries had suffered since they set out on the battlefield. Although this sacrifice had eliminated more than 40,000 enemies, this result still made Yang Chendong's heart ache. Standing behind him, Tiger's Mane, Beta Persei and the others' eyes were red, and the murderous intent in their hearts had unknowingly gathered. Young master, this hatred must be avenged. Of course it must be avenged. Yang Chendong said with absolute certainty. Not only did the Lansong kingdom take in Fan Yuhai's defeated troops, they even dared to take the initiative to attack them. If he did not destroy them, how could he get rid of the hatred in his heart? Wouldn't that make others look down on him? 6th Young Master. Song Zhi, Gao Yu, Lu Jian and Hong Jin finally appeared. From their bodies, one could see heavy fatigue. It was obvious that the 3 days and 4 nights of fierce battle had consumed a lot of their energy. As soon as the 4 of them appeared, they had a guilty look on their faces. With such a heavy loss this time, they did not know what kind of punishment they would receive. Although they had worked hard in the process, the result was still unbearable. This was especially true for Hong Jin, who was one of the 4. This time, he was the one who allowed the enemy to break in while he was defending the city. What was even more hateful was that there were some traitors among his subordinates. It could be said that he was the most responsible for this incident in Hanoi City. He was originally a defeated general, And this time he committed such a big mistake. He really did not have the face to face Yang Chendong. The reason why he came this time was to ask for forgiveness. He was even mentally prepared to be punished severely and even to hand over his military power. Yang Chendong stood there motionless like a mountain. His eyes swept across the four people's bodies and faces, bringing great pressure to them. Hong Jin's mistake was already mentioned. Gao Yu's mistake was that he did not follow the rules and regulations. As a result, the telegraph was always on. When it was needed, there was not enough power to receive the telegraph. Naturally, it was a big mistake to not be able to receive the news. Although Lu Jian worked hard in the battle, as the highest-ranking officer of Lung Feng, he only cared about the small area in front of him. He did not think about commanding the auxiliary troops, did not help this force, and did not even arrange for them to be on the watchtowers. Otherwise, the battle would not have been so difficult. As for Xianxia himself, he only focused on developing the economy. He did not think about how to deal with the enemy if they attacked. This was a little short-sighted. He did not even make good use of the 10,000 educated youths in the city. This was also a big mistake. The four people who had made mistakes, at this moment, no one dared to look at Yang Chendong. They all lowered their heads, waiting for the result of their punishment. Sigh. With a sigh, Yang Chendong knew that they were wrong. However, this was not what they wanted to face. It was because of their limited vision. He believed that with this experience, they should know how to deal with it in the future. You have worked hard. After sighing, Yang Chendong did not blame them. Instead, he encouraged them to say such a sentence. No matter what you did, you would have more advantages and benefits than others. The reason why they became educated youths was not because they did not want to join the Lung Feng, but because the Lung Feng's assessment was only held twice a year and the number of recruits was limited. Since they could not get a spot, they thought of other ways to contribute to the development of Hanoi City. Now, there was a chance to join the Lung Feng. Unknowingly, these educated youths had a desire to join the Lung Feng. That way, they would have a chance to join the Lung Feng. 2 batches of educated youths would make up 100,000 people. Not only did they have a certain level of military training, but they were also very educated and very young. These people were undoubtedly highly sought after by Governor Song. However, after these people were divided into different cities, under their leadership, they would definitely become a very powerful force. If used well, they would no longer have to fear other enemies. After handing over the matters of Yunnan province to Xianxia, Yang Chendong began to think about how to deal with the Lancang kingdom. In Yang Chendong's eyes, the deal was naturally different. This deal was to destroy the kingdom. Originally, he wanted to wait for the matters of Yunnan province to settle down before dealing with the Lancang kingdom. However, since the other party had made the first move, they could not blame him for making the first move. The Lung Feng's 3rd Regiment had already returned from the various cities. Just as Yang Chendong expected, the moment the Lung Feng appeared, Fan Yuhai immediately retreated with his men. Obviously, he knew that with his 50,000 men, it was impossible for him to win against the powerful mercenaries. With the return of the Lung Feng's 3rd Regiment, the matter of setting off for the Lancang kingdom was also brought forward. In a mere 5 days, the preparations for the war against the Lancang kingdom were completed. In order to take revenge for the destruction of Hanoi, this time, Yang Chendong mobilized the 2nd and 3rd Regiment of the Lung Feng's 20 battalions and the 30,000 Vietnamese mercenaries led by Hong Jin Ho, a total of 50,000 men. According to Yang Chendong's plan, once they took down the Lancang kingdom, Xi'an City would mobilize another 50,000 young men to complete the remaining tasks. Ships of military supplies were transported from Xi'an City to Yunnan province and sent to the various troops. The 40,000 mercenaries marched out of Hanoi City's west gate and headed straight for the Lancang kingdom. Their first destination was Heping County, which was next to Yinglu City in Yunnan province. Heping County was next to the Jiaoji region and was one of the most important cities of the Lancang kingdom. There was a 3,000-strong Lancang army here. Chapter 572. It could be said that if Sang Wenla was the representative of the military, then Long Qi was the representative of the civil officials. When such a person stood up to express his opinion, he quickly received the support of many civil officials below. Not only that, some people simply talked about the previous sneak attack on Hanoi City. They accused it of being a mistake and playing with fire. It would only put the Lansong kingdom in danger. Since ancient times, civil and military officials could not coexist. This was determined by their nature. Just like how military officials could only show their usefulness on the battlefield, civil officials needed the world to be peaceful. Only then could they display their talents. Once a war broke out, their abilities would be of little use. This was also why in history, whenever a war broke out, the civil officials would always advocate for peace while the military generals would always advocate for war. Payasai was still sitting on the high seat and watching everything with a smile. For an emperor, the balance of power represented their means. Civil and military opposing each other, this was what he wanted to see from the bottom of his heart. But when he saw the morale of the civil officials getting higher and higher, Sang Wenla and the other military officials slowly stopped talking and kept silent, he also saw that something was wrong. He hoped for the balance of power, but he definitely did not want to see either side getting bigger. Enough. Seeing that the situation was completely one-sided, Payasai finally had to stand up and speak. With this shout, the hall quickly quieted down, showing that King Payasai's authority was still very strong. The matter of the alliance with Fan Yuhai was discussed before. How can we break the agreement? Besides, the mercenaries first attacked General Lodi and killed him. This time, they killed General Sisi. We are already irreconcilable with them. Let's not think about getting along peacefully. Sang Wenla, this king now orders you to lead the army north and meet with General Fan Yuhai in Sangnu City. We must keep the enemy army out of the country. This subject understands. Sang Wenla lowered his head and respectfully agreed. When he raised his head, he looked at Long Qi and the others with a somewhat provocative gaze. The meaning of showing off was very obvious. The court meeting ended with the king's words. If Sang Wenla began to deploy the army, he also sent people to supervise the army's food. This time, an army of 100,000 was going to war. Just eating and drinking every day was not a small expense. Imperial tutor, General Sang is here to rush us for food and clothing. As soon as he returned to his residence, Long Qi saw some relevant officials waiting for him in front of his residence. He was not in a good mood, so he waved his hand impatiently. Here, give me whatever you want. State Preceptor, there are very few military supplies left in the national treasury. Do we have to take them all out at once? A few officials asked with constipation on their faces. They couldn't be blamed for being in such a difficult situation. First, 100,000 soldiers were defeated, and then 50,000 soldiers were defeated. Along with them, there were also a lot of military supplies. After a few battles, the inventory in the national treasury was getting smaller and smaller. And this time, Sang Wenla was even more greedy. He wanted the weapons and clothes of 100,000 people. This was already their limit. If they really took out the weapons according to this request, the treasury would be empty. If there was a need, they would not be able to take out anything. At that time, once the king gave the order, what would they do? That was why he came to seek advice from the imperial tutor. Very few? Haven't you been forging weapons and military uniforms? Long Qi asked with a frown. As the state preceptor, there were too many things he needed to manage. It was impossible for him to be clear about everything. A few officials had a difficult expression as they replied. If it's imperial tutor, we have been working hard. However, the consumption is too great. Right now, many of the weapons have only been polished for the first time. They only look like they have taken shape, but there is still a long way to go before they are tough enough. Yes, imperial tutor. It's the same for military uniforms, shoes, and hats. Only a part of them has been made. The rest are only half finished. We still need many embroiderers to work overtime for at least 2 months before they can be completed. The few subordinates were talking at once, which allowed Long Qi to have a better understanding of the situation. It was precisely because he understood enough that he raised his eyebrows slightly, and a strange look that no one knew flashed in his eyes. Then he quickly regained his calm. After muttering to himself for a moment, he said, "So that's the case. It's been hard on you. Sigh, speaking of which, it's all because those generals only know how to fight. They don't care about your feelings at all. Since that's the case and they are in a hurry, then just give them the half-finished products." Hearing Long Qi's reply, the few officials were stunned. They had an incomprehensible look on their faces. "What? You don't want to? If you don't want to, then go and explain to them yourselves. This imperial tutor doesn't care anymore." Seeing that these people didn't seem to agree with his idea, Long Qi angrily turned around and was about to walk into the mansion. This frightened the officials. They quickly stopped Long Qi's footsteps and asked, "If we give them the half-finished products, then once they find out about it on the battlefield, what should we do? If they find out, then so be it. They are overestimating themselves. Besides, this time, we are supposed to cooperate with Fan Yuhai in the battle. It's just a show of strength. Of course, if you have other ideas, then you can think of them," Long Qi said with an indifferent attitude. If there were other ideas, would they still ask for Long Qi's opinion? Thinking that there really wasn't a better idea, and that the soldiers were all like wolves and tigers. They looked like they would be beaten up at any time if they didn't give them the items. In the end, these officials made up their minds. After all, this idea came from Imperial Tutor Long Qi. If something happened, they wouldn't be alone. In the end, all of them expressed that they would listen to the order and left the Imperial Tutor's mansion. His ears finally quietened down. Long Qi strode towards the backyard of the mansion. "All of you wait outside. This Imperial Tutor wants to be alone for a while." Waving his hand, he dismissed the guards beside him and entered the courtyard alone. After there was no one around him, Long Qi's footsteps became faster. After making several turns, he stopped in front of a small house. After taking a deep breath, he pushed open the door and entered. The small house wasn't very big. Other than a bed, 2 chairs, and a small wooden table, there was nothing else. It looked very simple and crude. However, at this moment, there was a person sitting on a chair and fiddling with tea leaves in front of him. He seemed to be very focused and didn't seem to be displeased by the simple environment at all. "Mr. Yun." Long Qi's attitude became more respectful. It was far from the high and mighty attitude he had towards the lower officials. "Imperial Tutor is here. Please take a seat. You came just in time. Try the tea leaves I just brewed." Mr. Yun smiled and pointed at the empty chair in front of him. "Then let me try Mr. Yun's craftsmanship." Long Qi squeezed out a smile and sat down on the chair. The small house suddenly became much quieter. After the tea was brewed, Mr. Yun took the initiative to pour tea for both of them. Only then did Long Qi took the teacup and took a sip. Then, he pretended to be very intoxicated and said, "It's really good tea." Naturally, no one cared about whether the tea was really good or not. What everyone wanted was just the atmosphere. Mr. Yun looked at Long Qi's performance and chuckled. He understood that the other party was using this matter to express his attitude. Since the other party said that his tea was good and his attitude was so respectful, needless to say, this person had already made his decision. With this thought, the smile on his face became even wider. Then, his right hand reached into his bosom and 1,000,000 taels of silver banknote appeared in his hand. "Imperial Tutor, this is from our Duke of Loyalty. With this banknote, anyone can exchange it for the same amount of silver taels at any Yang family bank." He. Long Qi unceremoniously reached out and took the banknote. The smile on his face was as bright as a blooming flower as he said, "Duke of Loyalty is really generous. Long Qi admires you." This banknote was worth 1,000,000 taels of silver. Just how big was the Longtime kingdom? In a year, the national treasury's income was only about 2,000,000 taels of silver. This banknote was half a year's income. Who wouldn't be envious of it? Carefully putting the banknote into his bosom, Long Qi did not wait for Mr. Yun to speak. "That's right, this is only the beginning. Duke of Loyalty said that as long as Imperial Tutor does well, he will give you a total of 5,000,000 taels of silver. This can be considered as a form of support for the Long family's business in the future. When he heard the figure of 5 million taels of silver, Long Qi, who was still smiling mischievously, could not help but suck in a breath of cold air. That was a huge amount of wealth. With this, even if the Long family did not do anything, just the interest alone would be enough to feed them for several generations. When the figure of 5 million taels of silver was mentioned, the hesitation in Long Qi's heart completely disappeared. Of course, he was not worried that the Duke of Loyalty would not honor his promise. This was because he would become a role model. Whether it was good or bad, many people would see it. If the Duke of Loyalty really dared to play tricks with him, it would only cause more people's hearts to turn cold. It was said that the Duke of Loyalty was a person who did great things. He would not do things without propriety. Long Qi's thoughts were not wrong. Yang Chendong did not have the slightest intention of playing tricks with him. Since he had mentioned the figure of 5 million taels of silver, he would definitely honor it. This was related to his image to the outside world. How could he do something that would destroy his own Great Wall? Then again, the reason why he had to pay such a huge price was because Long Qi himself was worth this price. 5 million taels of silver was not a small amount in any country. However, when placed in the Crimson City that produced all kinds of novel goods, it was really not much. This was the advantage of having capital. As the saying goes, money can make the devil push the millstone. When the amount of silver reached a certain amount, it was not impossible for the millstone to push the devil. Furthermore, fighting a war was fighting for money. If one won a war, one could plunder more resources and good things. This seemed to have become a kind of cycle. It was just that if some people played it well, it would form a virtuous cycle. If some people did not play it well, it would easily collapse. Chapter 573. Obviously, Yang Chendong was the kind of person who liked to play. With a large warehouse, countless goods and all kinds of knowledge in his hands, this was enough to give him an advantage of a few hundred years. If he couldn't do this well, then he would have lived his life in vain. Of course, there were some things that couldn't be done immediately even if one had money. For example, the process of contacting and persuading Long Qi didn't go smoothly at first. The so-called Mr. Yun was Yun Ke, the leader of the Security Bureau's External Affairs Group 3. He was the one who had convinced Chen Di in Jiaoji Shiyu City to deal a heavy blow to King Li Li and his son, allowing the war to proceed more smoothly. After his contribution in Jiaoji, he was sent to the Lansong Kingdom and began to tackle problems here. Perhaps because the mercenaries didn't arrive here, it took a lot of effort to establish a relationship with Long Qi. After spending a lot of money, he finally met Long Qi. Long Qi still didn't trust him, or rather, he still had some illusions about the Lansong Kingdom. No matter what, Long Qi was still the state preceptor of the Lansong Kingdom. He was considered the role model and leader of the civil officials. For someone with such a high position and authority, it was extremely difficult for him to betray the Lansong Kingdom. Fortunately, Skylark was indeed capable. In order to meet Long Qi, he spent 1 million taels of silver. Sure enough, for the sake of money, the two finally met in private. Needless to say, with Skylark's ability, it didn't take long for Long Qi to be moved, especially after he was promised that the Yang family's goods in the Lansong Kingdom would be given to the Long family to handle. Long Qi really couldn't refuse. But even so, Long Qi didn't agree immediately. Instead, he said that he needed to think about it. In fact, he wanted to investigate properly. Sure enough, after they met and parted ways, many people from the state preceptor's residence left the Lansong Kingdom and rushed to Jiaoji and Great Ming as merchants. It was also because the investigation needed time, and before the final decision was made, Long Qi couldn't say anything. This caused Yang to not receive accurate information in advance when the battle in Hanoi City broke out, causing the mercenaries to suffer some losses. Although the sixth young master did not blame Skylark for this matter, he still blamed himself, thinking that his intelligence work was not good enough. In order to make up for this mistake, he suddenly appeared in the Imperial Advisor's residence and stayed there as a guest. This was definitely a risky move. Long Qi didn't reject Skylark's sudden appearance. Instead, he got someone to arrange a house for him in the backyard. The state preceptor's plan was also very good. If the people who came back with good news, he naturally wouldn't mind having a good talk with Skylark. On the other hand, he could also capture this person and send him to the king to show his loyalty. The path of advancement and retreat were both beneficial to him, so he allowed Skylark to move in. In the span of 2 months, the people that were sent out returned one after another. The news that they brought back completely shocked State Preceptor Long Qi. Doing business was an act of earning money. Long Qi was naturally clear about this. However, he didn't have a direct understanding of how profitable it was. Perhaps this was because the Longtime kingdom was too small, which limited his vision. However, the people that were sent out reported that as long as a merchant was able to do business with the mercenaries, they could be described as earning a lot of money. They used the Chang clan of the southern Ming dynasty as an example. They were originally a business aristocratic family. Later on, because of their relationship with the mercenaries, they heard that the future head of the Chang clan was a student of the Duke of Loyalty and Courage. With this, they could obtain more novel goods and sell them to other merchants. With the cooperation of the Yang clan's bank, the people from the state preceptor's residence were lucky enough to see some of the account books. The figures obtained from them shocked Long Qi even more. Just the Chang clan alone could earn up to 500,000 taels of silver a month from doing business. This was also because they were in the southern Ming dynasty, where the business competition was very fierce. If they could make a net profit of 500,000 taels of silver a month, wouldn't that be 6 million taels of silver a year? If the Long clan could also get a share of the profits, the Lan Song kingdom's spending power couldn't be considered small and there wasn't that much competition. Wouldn't they be able to make a few million taels of silver a year? With the figures in front of him, Long Qi had no choice but to take action. The scales in his heart finally tilted. Under the temptation of huge profits, he finally made the final decision to agree to Yang's request for cooperation and betray the Lan Song kingdom's interests. Not to mention whether the Lan Song kingdom could withstand the attacks of the mercenaries. Even if it could, the foundation of the kingdom would be shaken. Even if he was the state preceptor, how much could he gain from this? Not to mention that his position as the state preceptor wasn't permanent. It was already lonely at the top and there were many people secretly coveting this position. If he did something wrong, it was very likely that he would be consigned to eternal damnation. Then if the mercenaries won the war, where would he go? No matter how he looked at it, it was better to cooperate with the mercenaries. After all, the benefits were there and he wouldn't lose it. As long as he had money, he could enjoy life. As for what would happen to the Lan Song kingdom, it had nothing to do with him. He was just a subject, wasn't he? With a decision in his heart, Long Qi finally came to the backyard to meet the guest elder who had been in his residence for 2 months. When he came, Yang guessed that the other party had made up his mind and took out 1,000,000 taels of silver note, leaving the other party with no way out. Under the temptation of so much money, Long Qi indeed had no way out. Under the influence of greed, it was possible to do anything, not to mention the 3 million taels of silver that would be given after the matter was completed. Long Qi was actually thinking about it. It was possible to do business, but one had to have the capital to do so. Even though he had been the state preceptor for a few years, in reality, there were too many people that he needed to feed. In terms of money, he had only accumulated a few 100,000 taels, and this was under the situation where he held great power. Now that he even had the capital to do business, he naturally wouldn't have any scruples. He told Yang everything that happened in today's court meeting, as well as the few subordinates in charge of the war logistics looking for him. Very good. Yang was very satisfied with Long Qi's attitude. Since the state preceptor has already expressed his stance, then we are all on the same side. The victory of the mercenaries is also our victory. For this kind of victory, I think we can have some ideas on the soldiers of the Lan Song kingdom. As long as we can control their logistics, it will be a great achievement. And, if we really do make a contribution in this matter, I can consider suggesting to the Duke of Loyalty to give the state preceptor more money as a reward. Hearing that there was a great reward, Long Qi's eyes almost narrowed into slits. In order to express his gratitude, he revealed another piece of information. Mr. Yun, My people have discovered that many of the Han people stationed in the Longtime kingdom are being gathered. As for what they are doing, I am not too sure. Oh, there is such a thing? After hearing this, Yang's expression became much more serious. Although he didn't understand the reason behind this, it wouldn't happen for no reason. It seemed that there was a need to report this matter to the sixth young master. 40,000 mercenaries took down Hepping Town in a single attack. The town walls weren't high to begin with. The enemy only had 3,000 people and 10,000 civilians. It was impossible to stop the mercenaries from advancing. After taking over the town, Yang Chendong entered the barracks of the Longtime soldiers. Lun Feng's second commander Luo Pe, political commissar Kong Jie, third commander Wu Xing, and political commissar Chen Bo all came to the sixth young master. Sixth young master, in this battle, we have captured around 1,800 Longtime soldiers. Chapter 574. Since it was an order from the sixth young master, they had to carry it out. This was also the first lesson they learned after becoming the Cold Vanguard, which was to obey orders. The officers retreated. Yang Chendong, who was still looking at the sand table, punched the name of Wood Province. Order: the entire army will rest for a day, then attack Wood Province. Yang Chendong's words carried a hint of killing intent. The tragic scene in Hanoi City's commercial street had provoked him. His dream was to lead all the Han people to the peak of the world. He had just taken a step forward, but he had already suffered such a blow. This made him feel very guilty, and he also planned to vent his anger on Longtime Nation. Peace Town had been broken, and the mercenaries were charging towards Wood Province. After the frontline battle report returned, Fan Yuhai had already sent people to Longtime Land's capital, Wanxiang City, to urge for reinforcements. He even said that if reinforcements did not appear, he would retreat. He had originally come to help Longtime Nation, but now that the main character had not appeared, what was the meaning of him, the helper, staying here? Fan Yuhai's heart desired to defeat the mercenaries. In order to achieve this goal, he had made a lot of preparations this time. However, this did not stop him from scaring Longtime Nation. After all, the mercenaries were now in Longtime Nation's territory. By the time Fan Yuhai's men arrived at Wanxiang City, Sang Wenla had already led 100,000 soldiers out of the city. Since the king had already given the order, he naturally did not dare to delay. However, the required rations had not been gathered, and he could not possibly let the soldiers go to the battlefield on an empty stomach. Wasn't this? He had just finished preparing the military supplies when he led the army out. However, he did not know how terrible the rations that he had spent so much effort to obtain were. The rice was old, and it was the kind that had already started to rot and mold. The weapons were semi-finished products. They only looked in good shape, but when they were actually used, one would know how weak they were. Even the quality of the uniforms they wore was extremely poor. Some of them had already been unstitched before they even reached Sangwang City, causing countless soldiers to curse them. All of this was naturally the work of state preceptor Long Qi. He had already accepted Skylark's 2 million taels of silver. After making the decision to rely on the Duke of Loyalty, he no longer feared anyone. Moreover, in his eyes, since these 100,000 soldiers had left, there was no need for them to think about coming back. What was there to be afraid of? Half a month later, in front of Sang New City, the armies of both sides set up their battle formations, looking like they were going to fight it out. The attacking party consisted of more than 40,000 mercenaries. They left Hanoi, passed through Ing Brothel, took over Hepping Town, and took over Muzhou City. They came all the way to Sang New City. From afar, the defending side seemed to have the advantage in numbers. Sang Wenla led 100,000 troops, and with Fan Yuhai's 50,000, they had a total of 150,000 men. This did not include the 100,000 workers and 30,000 Han civilians that they had recruited from the nearby cities. The Longtime Kingdom once had an alias called the Lao's Comfort Department. It was originally a province of the Great Ming Dynasty. However, because the Great Ming Dynasty had lost its rule over Jiaoji, and the originally powerful Great Ming Dynasty had split into two after the Tumu Rebellion, Jiaozhi was naturally no longer under the Great Ming Dynasty's control. However, there were still some Han civilians within the Great Ming Dynasty. It was as if these 30,000 people were forcibly recruited from the nearby cities. Now, half of these Han civilians were pushed to the front of the battlefield. The remaining half were mixed in with the Lansong soldiers and Fan Yuhai's men. This was to prevent the mercenaries from firing cannons. Fan Yuhai had already experienced how advanced their cannons were during the Battle of Hanoi City. With that experience, he was fully prepared this time. The 30,000 Han civilians mixed in with the army were prepared to deal with the cannons. There were also 100,000 Lansong civilians. They had set up hundreds of catapults. In comparison, these catapults were very simple. Some were even built with rough wood, and the joints were connected with thick ropes. They could not be used for long, but when there were many of them, they were still quite powerful. This was the second method that Fan Yuhai had prepared. Since it was the second method, there should be a third. That's right, the third method was the 5,000 light cavalry. This was all that Fan Yuhai had. He had even taken out the 1,000,000 taels of silver that Bai Ming had given him. Only then could he have such a cavalry force that could charge and retreat quickly. Before the Ming Dynasty, the Mongols relied on their invincible war horses to kill their way into the Central Plains and establish the Yuan dynasty. From this, one could see how strong cavalry was. Other than these three methods, Fan Yuhai had another trump card, which was Li Min and Shin Kuan. They were all experts in close combat and possessed decent martial arts. As long as they found the right opportunity, they would be able to sever the head of the Duke of Loyalty amidst the chaos. If they succeeded, the mercenaries would be defeated without a leader. At that time, he would lead his army and fight his way through, restoring the glory of Jiaozhi and reliving the glory of the past. For this battle, Fan Yuhai had put in a lot of effort and made ample preparations. Right now, he was riding on a horse and mixed in with the cavalry. As he looked at the mercenaries in the distance who had also set up their battle formation, a trace of a smile appeared at the corner of his eyes. He wanted to see how the Great Ming's loyal duke, who was rumored to care for the Han people, would break out of this situation. On the side of the mercenaries, when they saw many civilians in Han attire being pushed to the front of the troops by the enemy, some of the officers immediately felt a sense of helplessness. Those who were able to become mercenaries had all stayed in Qiqian City before. Naturally, they knew about the sixth young master's dream of reviving the Han people. This dream was not just for show. In the Battle of Jiaozhi, the number of Han people saved had reached 80,000, and this number was still increasing as more cities surrendered. It could be said that the reason why the Cold Vanguard could be so united was because of the rising status of the Han people. Most of them were people who had suffered before, so they didn't want to see their children suffer again. Now that they had the chance to conquer a country for them and live a better life, how could they not give it their all? However, with so many of their compatriots standing in front of them and blocking their way, they felt like they had punched cotton, and it was very depressing. Through the binoculars, Yang Chendong saw the enemy's formation clearly, and a cold glint flashed in his eyes. Forcing the people to fight was clearly a despicable act, and it was shameful for a real man. If such a thing happened in the future, it would definitely be opposed and reprimanded by all the countries in the world. However, it was only the 14th century now, and the slogan of human rights had not been used before. Even Yang Chendong himself did not know how many people he had built, so it would be ridiculous to talk about human rights at this time. It could be said that the war at this time was all about cruelty and unscrupulous means. Fan Yuhai's actions made some people curse him for not being a hero and not doing things in an open and above-board manner. There was really nothing else to say about it. "Young master," Tiger's Mane stood at the side and shouted, not knowing what to do. The two commanders of the Cold Vanguard and the political commissar came to Yang Chendong's temporary command center. The situation at the front line was complicated, and it made them feel powerless. Of course, not all of them cared about the lives of the people. For example, the third commander, Wu Sheng, wanted to say that they should just kill. With the advanced cannons and continuous fire guns they had prepared, they only needed a fierce charge to suppress the enemy's morale, and there was hope for victory. Of course, This was only a thought in his mind, and Wuxing did not dare to say it out loud. He did not know what the sixth young master meant, and he dared to make such a statement. If he made him unhappy, his position as commander would be over. The four commanders were waiting for Yang Chendong's instructions. The command center was extremely quiet, until Beta Persei shouted, "Not good, the enemy is moving and they are slowly walking towards us." "What?" Luo Pe and the others exclaimed, and each of them looked at the battlefield through the binoculars on their chests. Yang Chendong also took the binoculars from Beta Persei, and saw the enemy encircling the Han civilians and approaching the center of the battlefield step by step. The look in his eyes became even more gloomy, and the command center was so silent that you could hear a pin drop. After a long time, he finally spat out a word with difficulty, "Retreat." "What?" Wu Sheng's reaction was the most intense, as if he could not believe his ears. How could such a military order be given? "I said retreat, everyone retreat." Yang Chendong was like an angry lion, and he roared at Wu Sheng. This time, everyone heard it clearly, and their bodies tensed up, and they immediately carried out their mission. Yang Chendong was left alone in his chair. He knew that these Han civilians were not real Han civilians, and they had lived in the Lansong kingdom for many years, and they had already gotten married or had children there. In their hearts, they had probably long forgotten about the great Ming dynasty. If these people died, then they died, and it was not considered a loss. However, in front of so many people, Yang Chendong had no choice but to give such a military order. This was because he wanted to establish a side in the army that loved his people like his own children. He wanted everyone to know that his goal of leading all Han people to the top of the world had not changed. "Young master." Tiger's Mane and Beta Persei walked to Yang Chendong's left and right. The two of them did not know what to say at this moment, and only thought that they should accompany the young master at this time. "I'm fine, you guys pack up and retreat." Yang Chendong seemed to be very weak as he waved his hand. However, in reality, the look in his eyes was extremely firm. He had already thought of a plan to deal with this situation, and what he did just now was more of an act. In fact, as early as a few days ago, Yang's information was sent over. Among them was the news that the nearby Han civilians were suddenly recruited. The moment he saw this news, Yang Chendong guessed in his mind what Fan Yuhai was going to do. Chapter 575. Using civilians as hostages. Perhaps the ancient people did not experience this many times. However, during the anti-Japanese era, this kind of thing happened countless times. However, this seemingly old-fashioned method was the most effective against those benevolent and righteous people. On this issue, their seniors had suffered many losses. When they were studying in the military academy, the instructors had also brought up this problem. It was a pity that even in the future, when technology was more advanced, no one could think of a good way to solve this problem. Fortunately, the students back then knew the nobility of human rights. No matter who it was, if they wanted to use this method again, they would first have to endure great pressure. They did not think that they would encounter such a situation again. At that time, Yang Chendong had also thought of this problem, but it was just a thought. After that, he threw it to the back of his mind. After all, he also did not think that such a thing would happen to him. He was the most powerful cold vanguard, the king of soldiers. He was used to carry out dangerous missions and not in this kind of conventional battle. The most hateful thing was that he actually had to face this problem now. For the past few days, Yang Chendong had been thinking about it. Until last night, when he looked at the moon hanging high in the sky and the bright moonlight shone down on the earth, he finally made a decision. Although it was not the best method, at least it was passable and no one would criticize him. Yang Chendong gave the order to retreat. The 40,000-strong army retreated for tens of li. When the sky was about to turn dark, Fan Yuhai's army finally stopped advancing. Then, everyone's face was filled with joy as they laughed heartily. They thought that they had finally found the soft rope of the mercenaries. If they had known that this method would be so effective, they would not have lost Jiaoji. Following the laughter, the 30,000 Han people were speechless and angry. Originally, They did not know what they were going to do here. However, after everything that happened today, they finally saw the truth. It turned out that they were going to be used as human shields. The anger in their hearts was as fierce as a tiger. It could only be said that they were like cats. In front of Fan Yuhai and the Lan Kingdom's army, who were many times more numerous than them, they did not dare to resist. All these years of living here had smoothed out the edges and corners of their struggles, making them accustomed to being oppressed and resigned to their fate. Of course, they were more worried that the Han army would suddenly launch an attack on them. If that was the case, the 10,000 Han soldiers at the front would undoubtedly be the first to be killed. Just like that, they were on tenterhooks for an entire day. Only when the sky had completely darkened did the Han citizens let out a sigh of relief. Although they did not know what would happen the next day, no matter what, they had managed to get through today's ordeal. As expected, these Han people are mercenaries. In the central tent, Sang Wang La's face was full of excitement. He sat on the big chair and drank wine. He felt incomparably carefree. Fan Yuhai was also very happy. Obviously, the feeling of having everything under control made him very comfortable. However, he was still a famous general, so he wouldn't easily show his arrogant side. Wasn't the mercenary army still there? To become a famous general, there were several requirements. For example, accurate judgment, fearless courage, the ability to control the entire situation, as well as a humble and cautious mentality. Fan Yuhai was undoubtedly qualified, but his years of cautiousness still made him say to Sang Wang, "General Sang, it's too early to be happy. The mercenaries are only retreating, they have not been defeated by us." Looking at these mercenaries, their military discipline is indeed strict. Even when they were retreating, they were still in an orderly manner. They will not be easy to deal with. As for the 30,000 Vietnamese mercenaries, their morale is already starting to weaken. Why don't we attack them when we advance tomorrow? As long as these 30,000 people are defeated, it will definitely affect the main force of the mercenaries. At that time, our opportunity will be presented. Everything that happened today had already proven Fan Yuhai's ability. Sang Wang naturally believed in his words. He nodded. "Okay, tomorrow morning we will plan properly. It's about time we take the initiative to attack." Previously, they did not attack because they were not sure if the Han citizens would be effective against the mercenaries. After all, this was an opponent that killed without batting an eyelid. Just the number of Jingguan statues that they had created was unknown. But now that they had found their weakness, how could they not take advantage of it? Good, tomorrow we will definitely defeat the mercenaries. Let's drink. Fan Yuhai was in a good mood as he raised his wine glass high towards his ally. Cheers! Sang Wang laughed loudly, showing the arrogant side of him when it came to drinking. The cold front had a strict discipline. During wartime, regardless of the reason, no one was allowed to drink. Because of this, they had even punished a few low-ranking officers. Those who were able to enter the cold front were all outstanding individuals. To become an officer, one had to put in a lot of effort and go through a lot of trials. Their family was extremely proud of having an officer in the cold front. But it was precisely because of drinking that they were taken away that they were wrongly accused. With such an example, even those who loved to drink could only suppress their desire for good food. There was no other choice. The treatment of the cold front was too good, and the halo that it gave off was too strong. No one was willing to voluntarily withdraw from such a team. At this moment, not only was no one in the cold front drinking, they were all sitting quietly. A strong sense of pressure was building up above their heads. For the first time, the incident during the day made them feel helpless. Facing their own compatriots, some of them even felt hatred in their hearts. Perhaps it was because their daily political work was too good, but the word surrender did not exist in the dictionary of the cold front soldiers. Even if they were the only ones left on the battlefield, they would still fight fiercely to show their existence. After all, if they became martyrs, their families would be respected and treated well. If they became captives, their families would not be able to raise their heads with them for the rest of their lives. Under this kind of ideological education, they looked down on those who were spineless, even if they were Han citizens. just like the 10,000 Han citizens who walked in front of the enemy during the day. Although they were forced to do so and had their own difficulties, it was not a reason for them to help the enemy do evil. Could it be that if the mercenaries and the Cold Front were defeated, these Han citizens would be considered meritorious? Would they be able to live a good life? The answer was obviously not like that. If the mercenaries were defeated, these Han citizens would no longer have any value. Although they would not be killed immediately, they would not be able to live a good life. Furthermore, because the mercenaries had injured many of the Longtime Kingdom soldiers, they would only vent their anger on these Han citizens. In other words, from the moment the mercenaries appeared on the land of the Longtime Kingdom, these Han people only had two choices. One was to live in grievance, the other was to bravely stand up and resist. Perhaps they would die, but perhaps they would be able to completely change the trajectory of their lives. This principle could be seen by all the Cold Front soldiers, but these Han citizens did not seem to be able to see it. Perhaps it was because they were uneducated and did not know how to think, or perhaps they did not know what resistance was. They did not know how to rely on their own efforts to earn the respect of others, to obtain their own dignity. Or perhaps, they did not even want to consider and face this problem. If that was the case, what was the difference between these people being alive and dead? For the sake of these people, they had no choice but to retreat. Who would feel good about it? If not for the strict discipline of the Cold Front soldiers, where obeying orders was the first thing they learned after joining the army, they would not have retreated step by step and revealed a trace of helplessness. However, the orders came from the 6th young master, so naturally, they could only obey. The Cold Front soldiers and the 20 auxiliary battalions ate dinner in such an atmosphere. After that, no one said a word, silently hugging their rifles and returning to their own barracks. The sky was already dark, but not a single soldier said that they were going to sleep. Under the suffocating state of mind, they probably would not be able to sleep even if they were asked to. Who knew if they would have nightmares when they finally fell asleep? No, we can't allow others to bully us like this. We must resist. Among the auxiliary soldiers, a company commander called Wang Yong suddenly broke the silence and stood up. Wang Yong's personality was straightforward. In order to avenge his family, he did not hesitate to enter the Cold Front soldiers' barracks under the guise of herding pigs and caused a huge ruckus. Fortunately, he was lucky enough to meet the 6th young master, Yang Chendong. After that, not only did he kill his enemy, Qing Yuan, from the Huang bandit army, he was also assigned as a temporary auxiliary soldier. After experiencing more than a dozen battles, Wang Yong finally matured. Not only did he become an auxiliary soldier, but he also became a company commander of the auxiliary soldiers. With his personality, it was normal for him to suddenly stand up and express his unfairness at this time. Originally, everyone was very depressed. All they lacked was a fuse to ignite their emotions. Wang Yong's sudden appearance gave everyone an outlet to vent their emotions. Very quickly, he received the support of many officers. Everyone was holding a breath in their hearts, but they did not know what to do. Since someone said that it was unfair and wanted to ask the 6th young master for help, many officers stood up. At first, it was only Wang Yong's battalion. Soon, this atmosphere spread to the other battalions, and they received even more support. In the end, even the Cold Front soldiers joined in. Commander Wu Sheng became the leader of the crowd. He brought more than 50 officers of platoon rank and above to the temporary command center. What are you all doing? Looking at the sudden appearance of so many officers in such a menacing manner, the 1st and 2nd guards in charge of the arrangements became 100 times more alert. Some of the guards even unlocked the safety of their guns, as if they were ready to fire at any moment. Chapter 576. The captain of the 1st Guard team, Qiu Vi, and the captain of the 2nd Guard team, Dao Xiao, were also holding their guns. Their eyes were filled with anger, especially when they looked at Wu Sheng, the leader of these officers. Their eyes were filled with murderous intent. Obviously, they thought that this was a mutiny and that Wu Sheng was the leader. Wu Sheng's face turned bitter when he noticed the 2 guard captains' murderous gazes. He would not dare to harm the sixth young master even if he had 100 guts. He was here to ask for a battle. In order to avoid any misunderstandings, he and the other officers did not bring any weapons. Captains, you've misunderstood. We're here to request a battle. We're not here to harm the sixth young master. We don't have the guts to do that. In order to clear up the misunderstanding, Wu Sheng nervously explained. Qiu Vi and Dao Xiao did not listen to Wu Sheng's explanation. They only knew that these people had come to the sixth young master's tent without orders and had threatened the safety of the tent. They had to deal with these people according to their duties. Men, tie these people up. Once the two captains gave the order, 60 guards ran out from all corners and pounced on the 50-plus officers like ferocious tigers. These guards did not care what they were here for. Since their captains had given the order, they did not hold back. They used all their strength and pressed the officers who had come to ask for a battle to the ground. However, the officers didn't dare to resist. If they did, it would be no different from a rebellion. But the problem was, who dared to rebel against Yang Chendong? Soon, the 50 officers were restrained. Their hands were tied behind their backs and pressed to the ground. Some of the officers had to pay a price for this. For example, their mouths came into close contact with the ground and they were already eating dirt. Wu Sheng was also held down. Perhaps because he was the captain and a fierce general, the number of people holding him down increased from 1 to 2. With the 8 captains, Jiang Yuping, controlling him, he could not resist at all. We can't accept what you're doing. We want to see the sixth young master. Although he was restrained, his mouth wasn't sealed. Wu Sheng was still shouting and yelling. He was now the leader of Cold Front, and he was definitely one of the higher-ups of Cold Front. But now, he was actually being pressed to the ground and eating dirt. How could he be willing? Hearing Wu Sheng's shout, the other officers also shouted, looking like they would rather be beaten to death. Seal their mouths. Chou Wu said with a black face when he saw that he couldn't calm them down. He looked like he was about to sew Wu Sheng's and the others' mouths with a needle. Once the order was given, some members immediately went to find towels and other things to stuff their mouths with. This caused the officers to struggle even more. If they were really gagged, then wouldn't they really become rebellious officers who couldn't speak reason? What? Seeing that the situation was about to change if the officers resisted, the guards were about to be ruthless. Just as they were about to get injured, a voice shouted. Tiger's Mane, a senior colonel, appeared. There were only 3 senior colonels in the entire Xianxia army. They were the Army's division commander, Leng Song, and the Navy's division commander, Gao Xiong. The last one was Tiger's Mane. This also showed his lofty status and identity. As soon as Tiger's Mane appeared, 2 guard captains immediately walked up and said, Tiger's Mane, these officers came without orders. There are so many of them. We were afraid that there would be problems, so we took the initiative. But we didn't even bring a single weapon. How could we have other thoughts? We just want to see the sixth young master. We want to fight. Wu Sheng, who was pinned down, forced his head up and looked at Tiger's Mane. At the same time, he looked at Ba Dao Jiang and Pringyu with a warning gaze. It was as if he was saying, Brats, I'll remember you. Just wait and see how I'll deal with you later. Ba Dao Jiang and Pingyu naturally didn't care about the threat in Wu Sheng's eyes. They were the sixth young master's guards. They already had a high status. Even if Leng Song and Gao Xiong were here, they didn't have the right to order them around. Enough. Tiger's Mane saw everything. His body shook and he shouted angrily, We're all brothers. Why are you using weapons? Let them go. Let them go? Tiger's Mane, there are more than 50 of them. The second guard captain, Dao Xiao, said unwillingly. Once what? Or do you have no confidence in yourselves? Even 60 people with guns can't deal with 50 people? Listen to my order. Let them go. The sixth young master wants to see them. Tiger's Mane's eyes flashed coldly as he looked at Dao Xiao. Once he heard that it was the sixth young master's order, Dao Xiao immediately became obedient. After he agreed, he gave the order to let them go. Wu Sheng and the rest of the 50 guards were freed. Wu Sheng stood up. He first shook off the dirt on his body. Then he saluted Tiger's Mane and said, Thank you for your help, Tiger's Mane. There's no need to thank me. This is the sixth young master's idea. But I also want to remind you that when you see the sixth young master, you only need to express your opinion and attitude. Don't make a fuss. Otherwise, before anyone else can deal with you, I'll make the first move. Tiger's mane's words were not just for show. Everyone knew that he had been serving the sixth young master for many years and was regarded as the most trusted person. If they offended him, Wuxian and the rest would not be able to withstand his suppression. It wouldn't even be long before their military officer halos would be removed. Knowing that he could not go against Tiger's mane, Wuxian nodded repeatedly. Don't worry, Tiger's mane. We know what we're doing. Although he said that, whether he knew what he was doing or not was quickly seen. When Wuxian and the rest of the 50 guards entered the command center, they became enraged again. One by one they asked to fight. Some even said that if they couldn't fight, they might as well be demoted. This was because they couldn't lead the soldiers under them. It would be better to be an ordinary soldier. The shouting continued for a while. Tiger's mane scolded them several times, but there was no effect at all. The guards all talked at once and had no intention of stopping. Yang Chendong sat in his chair and watched Wu Sheng and the others' performance very calmly. He did not speak at all. It wasn't until the time it took for a stick of incense to burn past and the guards were all talking that he coughed softly. Beta Persei, who was standing at the side, immediately understood and shouted, "Shut up, all of you. The young master has something to say." A voice like a lion's roar resounded throughout the command center, causing everyone's eardrums to tremble. At this time, they finally understood why the sixth young master always told Beta Persei to speak softly. If he didn't suppress it, no one's ears would be able to withstand such a loud voice ringing in their ears every day. But the effect of this roar was also good. At least everyone's mouths were half closed and no one said anything more. The command center quieted down. Yang Chendong's gaze slowly swept across everyone one by one. Anyone who was stared at by his gaze would involuntarily lower their head, like a child who had made a mistake. "You want to ask for battle?" Yang Chendong finally asked the first question after an unknown amount of time. "Yes, sixth young master, we want to ask for battle." Wu Sheng's official position was the highest here, so naturally, he was the one who answered Yang Chendong's question. Yang Chendong wasn't surprised or angry that Wu Sheng stood up for him. Instead, he asked, "Then do you know that the enemy has placed our compatriots in the front line? If we attack, we might hurt them." Wu Sheng nodded. "We know." Wu Sheng answered happily. Obviously, he had already thought about the situation and problems he would face before he came. Thus, not only did he answer without hesitation, he also said the following words very smoothly, "But we also know that if we blindly retreat, it will not only harm our compatriots in front of us, but even our Han compatriots behind us will also be implicated. We can't lose the big picture for the small. Besides, what are you talking about?" Yang Chendong asked with interest when he saw Wu Sheng's hesitant look. "Besides." As if he had gathered his courage, Wu Sheng said with a resolute expression, "Besides, they are now being threatened by the enemy and have no intention of resisting." "Then they are not our compatriots, but the enemy's accomplices. Facing such people, we can't be soft-hearted." "Nonsense." Yang Chendong's originally amiable face suddenly turned cold, stopping Wu Sheng from saying what he wanted to say next. "Sixth young master." Wu Sheng wanted to continue speaking, but Tiger's mane, who knew Yang Chendong very well, shouted loudly, "Listen to the young master. If you dare to speak nonsense again, I will lock you up." Putting aside the unpleasant feeling of being locked up, just the fact that they were facing a powerful enemy, if they were locked up, wouldn't they miss out on the big battle? Without a battle to fight, that was Wu Sheng's weakness. He quickly shut his mouth and did not dare to continue speaking. Wu Sheng didn't say anything, but Yang Chendong continued, "Just because they were threatened by the enemy doesn't mean that we don't recognize them as our compatriots. In fact, they've suffered a lot over the years. They suffered a lot. The reason why we attacked the Lansong nation was not only to take revenge for provoking us, but also to save more Han people, so that they can live a better life like our family. Don't you think so?" "Yes, Yes, the sixth young master is merciful. For the sake of the Han people, heaven and earth can be our witness. The group of officers said in unison. They weren't trying to flatter him, but they were thinking the same thing from the start. All right, since everyone agrees with my point of view, let's prepare for the army's retreat after daybreak. If there are no other questions, you can all go back. Yang Chendong waved his hand helplessly as if the matter had been settled. Chapter 577. If it was any other time, Yang Chendong would have said something like this and no one would have any objections. However, when they heard that there was still a retreat, the officers could not accept it. If they continued to retreat like this, when would there be an end? Sixth young master, we can't retreat anymore. If we continue to retreat, we will have to return to Yunnan province. There are more Han people there. Once the war extends there, the losses will be even greater. Yes, we can't retreat anymore, sixth young master. It's not wrong for you to feel sorry for the Han people, but doing so will only allow the enemy to take a mile after taking an inch and hurt more people. We can't retreat, we have no way out. The officers all spoke at once. No matter what they said, there was only one conclusion, and that was that they could not retreat anymore. We really can't retreat anymore, sixth young master. Suddenly, a voice rang out from outside the command center. Following that, 2nd Regiment Commander Luo Po, Political Commissar Kong Jie, and 3rd Regiment Political Commissar Chen Bo strode into the command center. With such a huge commotion, how could the three of them not know? There was only one reason why they did not appear, and that was because they had the same thoughts as these officers. Since they had the same thoughts, why not let these people cause a ruckus? Perhaps there would be some good results. However, outside the tent, when they heard Yang Chendong say that they would continue to retreat, the three of them could not help but take the initiative to stand out. Another 3 regimental-level officers stood out. Together with Wu Sheng, all 4 regimental-level officers had the same attitude. Obviously, this brought a lot of pressure to Yang Chendong. This could be seen from the fact that he did not speak and was frowning. Yang Chendong did not speak, which meant that he valued the opinions of Luo Pe and the other 2. Since they were not rejected immediately, the 3 of them saw an opportunity and hope. After looking at each other, the political commissar of the 2nd Regiment, Kong Jie, stepped out and said in a pleading tone, "Sixth young master, we have to fight this war. If we retreat, it will really be like what everyone said, we will only implicate more Han brothers. So counterattack is necessary, and as long as we handle it well, we should be able to reduce the number of casualties." What do you think? Yang Chendong looked at Kong Jie and asked. "Sixth young master, I think that when we start the attack, we can shout the slogan, 'Tell the Han people to get down.' If they do, our bullets will only sweep across them. That way, the possibility of hurting them will be minimized. Isn't that better?" Kong Jie said his idea in one breath. From this point, it could be seen that his idea was not a sudden one, but an answer that he had thought about for a long time. Yang Chendong praised the other party's method in his heart. It seemed that this was the only way. However, on the surface, he still looked contemplative and doubtful. If that's the case, our cannons won't be able to exert their advantage. Can we defeat hundreds of thousands of enemies? That's not a problem. I promise that we officers will charge at the front line and set an example to all the soldiers. As long as we charge fiercely and fast enough, and don't give the enemy a chance to counterattack, even without the support of cannons, we can still win the battle. Wu Sheng finally had a chance to speak again. He said excitedly and patted his chest as if he was giving a military order. With Wu Sheng taking the lead, the other officers also followed suit. One by one, they patted their chests and made a promise. At this moment, the morale of the soldiers was high and strong. Yang Chendong also knew that it was time to make a decision. He had been waiting for this moment. Meng suddenly stood up from his chair. "Since everyone is so confident, what you said is also very reasonable. Then I order everyone to go down and prepare. After 2 hours, we will launch a fierce attack. But you must remember what you said and do your best to ensure the safety of our fellow Han people. Yes. The 60 officers saluted together. At this moment, they were all extremely excited. This was a battle that they had taken the initiative to ask for. They would definitely give it their all and not let the sixth young master look down on them. However, they did not know that this was all arranged by Yang Chendong. During the day, no one noticed the sudden meeting between Tiger's Mane and Wang Yong. The process was simple. Tiger's Mane used his status to ask Wang Yong for help and mobilized more officers to persuade the sixth young master. As for whether this was Tiger's Mane's request or Yang Chendong's own idea, only the master and servant knew. The petition finally ended with the satisfaction of all the officers. The next step was to prepare for the battle. There were two reasons for choosing to fight at night. Firstly, it was because the enemy would not be able to completely control the Han civilians under their control. Secondly, it was because the morale of the troops was at its peak. If they did not make use of this opportunity, it would inevitably be discouraged during the day. This would directly affect their fighting strength. As for how effective it would be to shout slogans to get the Han people to kneel down and cooperate with them, no one could predict. There should be some effect, but it was impossible to not kill a single Han person. The petitioning officers returned to their respective barracks. Then, they recounted the scene of their encounter with the sixth young master to everyone with exaggerated details, causing many people to be extremely excited. This was a battle opportunity that they had taken the initiative to ask for. Of course, they had to perform well. Otherwise, not only would they fail to live up to the trust that the sixth young master had placed in them, they would also be punished for it. Even if it was for their own future, they had to perform well this time. The fighting spirit of the officers was roused. Very quickly, the soldiers under them were all riled up. Originally, the retreat during the day had already made them extremely unhappy. Now that they could finally fight back, no one would say anything. They all patted their chests and promised that they would perform well. The mercenaries were already in an uproar. Their fighting spirit soared into the sky. The enemy camp was completely unaware. Late at night, Fan Yuhai and Sang Weng returned to their respective tents to rest after finishing their drinking. They wanted to have a good night's sleep and wait until dawn to see how the mercenaries retreated. Then, they would look for an opportunity to attack. The weather at the end of January was still slightly cold. Many Lancang soldiers and former Jiaoji soldiers on night duty curled up and leaned against each other for warmth. They closed their eyes and took a nap. In the darkness, 400 meters away, the mercenaries had already charged back. In comparison, they were all burning with passion. At this moment, they were staring at the enemy under the torches. As soon as the order to attack was given, the entire army would charge out. In order to better complete this mission, the two main regiments of the Cold Front and 20 auxiliary battalions were all mobilized. A total of over 10,000 people wielded the 95 style or 81 rifles. They looked like ferocious tigers descending from the mountains. Behind them were 30,000 Vietnamese mercenaries, led by General Hong Jin. They were all waiting for the battle to begin. Pass down the order. Later on, everyone will perform well. Do not fall behind the mercenaries. Chop off the enemy's dog head. Hong Jin was also holding back his anger as he spoke. He could already feel the anger in the sixth young master's heart. When his master was angry, as a dog, he naturally had to take a bite out of the enemy. It was not only to show his ability, but also to show his loyalty. He would definitely not let go of such an opportunity. The hands on the watch moved up and down. When it was 1 a.m., Luo Pe, the regimental commander of the 2nd Regiment, and Wu Sheng, the regimental commander of the 3rd Regiment, stood up almost at the same time and roared, "Charge!" Then, thousands of soldiers and horses started to move at a high speed. More than 40,000 people roared in unison. Their footsteps landed on the ground, causing the earth to tremble at this moment. The moon hanging high in the sky also drilled into the clouds at this moment. It seemed to be afraid, or perhaps it could not bear to see the massacre happen. What's going on? A sudden roar rang out, causing the enemy soldiers 400 meters away to wake up from their daze. Chapter 578. Quick, gather the cavalry and prepare to retreat. Oh right, inform Li Min and Shen Kuan to make their move. After venting his frustrations, Fan Yuhai quickly regained his composure and gave out orders. The attack of the mercenaries was too sudden, to the point that he did not have the time to prepare properly. Based on his intuition, the outcome of this battle was already decided. Since they were going to lose, then the most important thing was to preserve their strength. The other troops could be abandoned, but the 5,000 cavalrymen could not be left here. With the speed of their war horses, they could definitely retreat safely. Under Fan Yuhai's orders, the 5,000 cavalrymen quickly gathered and protected Fan Yuhai as they left the camp. They did not even turn back to Sang New City, but turned and fled in another direction. It was obvious that he knew his place. He knew that a single city would not be able to stop the powerful mercenaries. At the moment when he led the cavalrymen to retreat, over 100 figures headed in the opposite direction. The leaders were Li Min and Shen Kuan. They had a more important mission to complete. Compared to Fan Yuhai's decisiveness, Sang Wang-Le's reaction was slower. When he was woken up from his sleep and was told that the mercenaries were coming, he did not escape immediately. Instead, he ordered his men to launch a counterattack. At the same time, he arranged for the captive Han people to be brought over. He wanted to kill the Han people in front of the mercenaries, to kill until the other party was terrified and had no choice but to retreat. It was a beautiful dream, but reality was a blow to people. Sang Wengla had forgotten how strong the enemy was, and how he had successfully infuriated the other party when he forced them to retreat earlier in the day. Once the order was given, how likely was it to be executed? The second and third Cold Vanguard was like a ferocious tiger, stabbing into the heart of the enemy like a pair of sharp blades. After facing a little resistance, they managed to rescue 4 groups of Han people, each group having about 1,000 Han people. These captive Han people were like livestock, their movements fixed by a few wooden stakes. Even when the Cold Vanguard arrived, they did not dare to break through the stakes. Just from this point, they were a bunch of zombies, without any fighting spirit. Fortunately, not only were these people obedient to the enemy, they were also obedient to the mercenaries. When the slogans were heard, each and every one of them lay on the ground, trembling. It was as if they wouldn't get up even if they were beaten to death. This allowed them to dodge the bullets flying in all directions, ensuring their safety to the greatest extent. Some of the enemies were still threatening and even killing a few people, trying to force them to stand up. However, it was all in vain. Facing the Han people who were already scared out of their wits, their words did not have any effect. Even if they waved the butcher's knife, they would only kill a few hostages who did not dare to resist. When they realized that the Han people could no longer be used as hostages and the mercenaries were advancing faster and faster, the Lansong soldiers had no choice but to retreat. Without hostages, the mercenaries could unleash 100% of their strength and were not afraid of the enemy's counterattack. In the middle of the army, Sang Wengla took the initiative to enter the battlefield, leading his personal guards to command the 100,000 Lansong workers who were woken up from their sleep to use the catapults to launch a counterattack. General, our soldiers are currently fighting with the mercenaries. If the rocks fall, it will injure the enemy and also our own brothers. One of the captains saw that the enemy was about to attack indiscriminately and anxiously came up to console him. Scram! It is our soldiers' glory to be able to fight to the death with the mercenaries. Men, throw the rocks, throw them. Sang Wengla already knew that Fan Yuhai had escaped with the cavalry, and at this moment, he was incomparably furious. Does the world think that the mercenaries are invincible? Then I will use my strength to defeat them and tell the world that the Lansong soldiers are the strongest. The 100,000 workers came to the front of the catapults and pushed the rocks that were prepared during the day over. Then the rocks flew into the air. It looked like a huge commotion. However, in the dark night, without any professional training, the catapults had no accuracy at all. They just hit wherever they hit. The rocks flew in all directions and whistled past everyone's heads before smashing into the ground, creating a huge pit. It created a huge pressure on the soldiers on the battlefield. They are really vicious, even smashing their own people. Quick, charge with me. As long as we reach the front of the catapults, these things will be useless. Wuxia saw a huge rock fly past his head and smash a dozen meters behind him. He couldn't help but grin and suck in a breath of cold air. Then he quickly made a decision and ordered the army to speed up. The huge rocks gave the mercenaries a huge amount of pressure. At the same time, it also gave pressure to the Lansong soldiers and the 40,000 soldiers that Fan Yuhai had abandoned. When they saw the falling rocks, they originally wanted to rely on their numbers to fight it out with the mercenaries. But now they turned and ran. What kind of joke was this? These rocks did not have eyes at all. Before they could even see the mercenaries, they would be smashed to death by the rocks. How unlucky would that be? Sang Wenla, who had originally wanted to use the catapults to turn the situation around, did not know that his actions had caused the army at the front to crumble. The charging mercenaries did not meet with the crazy resistance that they had imagined, and they were getting closer and closer to the enemy. The 2nd Regiment and 3rd Regiment were like two sharp knives. The 20 battalions of auxiliary soldiers were like a huge net, pushing forward from behind. The 30,000 Vietnamese mercenaries were at the back, constantly rescuing the Han civilians and dealing with the small groups that had slipped through the net. At this point, it was worth mentioning that the 2 million silvers were not spent in vain. Under the instructions of Grand Tutor Long Chi, although they managed to obtain the Lansong weapons, they were only half-finished products. When they encountered the incoming Vietnamese mercenaries, they got into formation and engaged in battle. Only then did they discover that the blades and spears in their hands had been broken into two after just a few clashes. The weakness of their weapons dealt a heavy blow to the Lansong soldiers. How could they be a match for steel blades and spears with their bare hands? Thus, many of the Lansong soldiers died with hatred. They did not lose in terms of battle strength, nor did they lose in terms of courage. Instead, they lost in terms of logistics. The speed of the 2 cold vanguard regiments was too fast. Everyone seemed to be holding their breaths as they advanced at lightning speed. Whenever they met with resistance, they would open fire without hesitation, not giving the enemy a chance to get close. In just an hour, they had broken through the front line and arrived at the center of the camp. The arrival of the Cold Vanguard Regiment was like a hot knife through butter. They arrived in front of the trebuchets, killing the Lansong soldiers and causing them to flee in all directions. Even General Sang Wenla was forced to retreat to Sang New City under the protection of his personal guards. There were still 50,000 soldiers left behind to guard the city. No matter what, they still had the strength to fight. After charging for over a dozen li, they entered the middle camp from the enemy's front camp, then into the back camp. The Cold Vanguard Regiment was unstoppable. This time, the combat strength that they displayed made the enemy unable to help but change their opinion of them once again. Awesome! Seeing the enemy being forced back to Sang New City, other than his beloved comrades, there was a group of prisoners kneeling on the ground. The 3rd Regiment commander Wu Sheng could not help but howl to the sky. However, he also fell to the ground with a plop. At the same time, he was also really tired. After chasing the enemy for over a dozen li, the sky had just turned bright. In other words, they had run so far in just 6 hours. Not to mention running for over a dozen li, they had to keep charging and facing all kinds of problems. Normally, it would be difficult for the Cold Vanguard Regiment to do this. This time, it was because of the strong morale of the soldiers and the anger that they had suppressed previously that they were able to achieve this result. Commander Wu Xing did not know that all of this was within Yang Chendong's calculations. He knew better than anyone else whether the Han civilians would appear or not. Thus, he had no choice but to retreat during the day and suddenly charge back at night. The officers requesting to fight was also part of his plan. This way, not only could he offset the fact that the enemy had hostages, he could also stimulate the fighting spirit of the outstanding soldiers. It was truly killing 2 birds with 1 stone. It should be killing 3 birds with 1 stone. Because these officers were the ones who requested to fight first, he reluctantly agreed to send out troops. This way, even if there were more casualties among the Han hostages, no one would blame him. This was the unanimous opinion of all the officers, and he was just pushing the boat along. Perhaps some people would think that this was the mentality of a careerist. But since ancient times, how could there be no casualties? War was never a case of you advancing and I retreating, and I advancing and you retreating. There would always be all kinds of benefits and problems. For example, the 36 stratagems of the art of war, a battle of wills and courage, you plotting against me and I plotting against you. On the other hand, history was always written by the victors. No matter how well you did things, once you lost, it was inevitable that others would say that you were pedantic. On the other hand, as long as you did not use too heaven-defying methods to win, others would say that you were wise, smart, or even great. This was history. This was the so-called true history that future generations could see. And right now, Yang Chendong had won. He was undoubtedly great, but what others did not know was that this great person was currently experiencing a life and death crisis. Li Min, Shen Kun. One was the adopted son of the former king of Jiaoji, the other was a high-level assassin sent by Baiming. Originally, these two people had nothing to do with each other. Even their lifelines would not be tangled in the slightest. However, because of a common goal, they actually joined forces, and that goal was to kill Yang Chendong. Chapter 579. One was for revenge, and the other was for precaution. Under Fan Yuhai's persuasion, the two of them came together. Then, they each led their men who had been trained for many years. When the mercenaries launched an all-out attack in the middle of the night, they bypassed the main army and quietly headed to the rear where Yang Chendong might be hiding. In this battle, in order to achieve the goal of severely injuring the Lansong soldiers and the Jiaoji remnants in one fell swoop, Yang Chendong sent out all his men. Not only did he send out the two main regiments, 20 auxiliary battalions, 30,000 Vietnamese mercenaries, even the Wolf Fong Special Forces and the Ghost Sniper team, who were hidden in the dark, were all sent out. It was just to increase the bargaining chip and obtain a greater victory. In this way, Yang Chendong's security force was only left with 60 members of the 1st and 2nd Guard squads. But even so, no one felt that there was any problem. Not to mention that they were originally at the rear of the army. The enemy had no time to deal with the attacks of the mercenaries, so why would anyone come find trouble with them? With the presence of the 1st and 2nd Guard squads, who could rush into the headquarters and hurt Yang Chendong. No one had such strength, so this time, even Tiger Man, who had always been cautious, did not say that he would leave any troops behind to strengthen the young master's security force when he saw the army move out one by one. Now that the battle was the priority, one more person left behind would mean one less force on the battlefield. In the big picture, he would not do this. No one thought that there would be any danger, but the danger really did appear. That was when Yang Chendong stood in front of the sand table, constantly listening to the battle reports from the reconnaissance battalion in front. Just as he was practicing the battle between the two sides, gunshots suddenly rang out from outside. What's going on? Without needing Yang Chendong to ask, Beta Persei immediately walked out. As the 6th young master's inseparable shadow, his existence had always been detached from the rest. Among the 5 guards of the Yang family, he was also ranked the highest. This was also because his responsibility was to ensure the safety of the 6th young master. This task was originally sacred and noble. Second brother, someone is approaching us and has been discovered. Now we have sent people to chase after them. The captain of the 1st Guard squad, Chiu V, flashed out from the darkness and repeated what had just happened. Be careful. Beta Persei nodded. He just thought that some stragglers had accidentally entered here. However, his duty still made him say this very seriously. Don't worry, second brother. Chiu V nodded his head. Although he was a little older than Beta Persei, in terms of duty, especially in the heart of the 6th young master, he was obviously not as important as Beta Persei. It was not a loss to call him second brother. Beta Persei returned to the command center. When he saw Tiger's Mane's questioning gaze, he gently shook his head, indicating that it was not a big deal. After Tiger's Mane gave him a reassuring look, he followed behind Yang Chendong and inserted flags everywhere on the sand table. Bang, bang, bang. Several gunshots rang out again. This time, the sound seemed to be a little clearer. Beta Persei's figure flashed out again, but not long after, he walked back. There were still small groups of enemies appearing, but it was not a big deal. Tiger's Mane continued to assist the sixth young master in completing the military situation analysis on the sand table, but then the third wave of gunshots rang out. This time, without waiting for Beta Persei to rush out of the command center, Tiger's Mane was the first to walk out. If the first time was a coincidence, the second time was an accident, then what was the third time? If it was too much of a coincidence, then it was not a coincidence. Someone had done it on purpose. Soon, Tiger's Mane walked back to the command center, but at this moment, his face was not looking good. When he noticed that Yang Chendong was looking at him, he knew that he had to tell the truth. He lowered his head and said, "Young master, some unknown enemies suddenly appeared outside. They're like ghosts. They come and go without a trace. 3 of our team members have been injured." "Injured? Did you catch the culprit?" Yang Chendong was surprised when he heard this. He was well aware of the strength of the guard squad. Putting aside the fact that their training requirements were already higher than the most elite of the cold front, just the sparring sessions with him had already shown how much they had improved. For someone to be able to injure them, and even injure 3 of them in one go, it was only natural that they would be shocked. Tiger's Mane, who was questioned by Yang Chendong, looked a little bitter. After a moment of hesitation, he replied, "Our brothers are incompetent. We didn't catch the culprit. They were too fast, and the team members didn't dare to chase after them. They were afraid that they would be lured away. We didn't catch them." This time, Yang Chendong raised his eyebrows, but soon he laughed out loud. Interesting. It seems that this is a force to be reckoned with. What about the young master?" Although Yang Chendong was laughing, Tiger's Mane knew that he was laughing out of anger. How could the master laugh happily when his team members were injured? "What do we do? Of course, we hit them. We can't let them act tough in front of us. How about this? If they come again, let the team members chase after them. They can hide for a while in the dark, but I don't believe that they can hide forever. If you see any suspicious targets, shoot. Don't be afraid of wasting bullets," Yang Chendong said fiercely. His smile had long since disappeared. Tiger's Mane naturally wouldn't disobey Yang Chendong's suggestion. However, there was still a problem, so he asked, "Young master, how many people should we send out at once?" "Let's send out the entire second guard team first," Yang Chendong replied after pondering for a moment. If he sent out too few people, he was afraid that they would fall into the enemy's ambush. The gains would not make up for the losses. The entire second squad had 30 people, and they were used to cooperating with each other. Even if they faced enemies 10 times more than them, there wouldn't be any problems. With the advantage of guns, they could still retreat if they couldn't win. As soon as he heard that the entire second squad would be sent out, Tiger's Mane hesitated for a moment and said, "Young master, isn't it too much?" Not much. The first time we send out the second squad, if there are still people coming, it proves that the enemy's strength and numbers won't be too small. Then, we'll send out the first squad as well." After saying this, Yang Chendong glanced at Tiger's Mane and Beta Persei. He wanted to send out the 2 of them as well. After all, the enemy's goal must be to target him, and if there wasn't a good enough opportunity, they wouldn't easily appear. Therefore, it was best not to leave anyone around him to ensure that he could lure out the killer. However, he also knew that even if he said so, the 2 of them would not agree. Other things could be discussed, but when it came to their own safety, they would not execute it even if they were beaten to death. Being able to withdraw the 2 guard squads was already the biggest concession they could make. Tiger's Mane didn't know that Yang Chendong wanted to send him out, because even if the first guard team was sent out, he would have already jumped to his feet. No, absolutely not. Looking at Tiger's Mane's desperate look, Yang Chendong was moved, but he pretended to be angry and said, "What? You're the young master, and I'm the young master. If I say it's okay, then it's okay. Beta Persei, beat him up." "Okay." Beta Persei naturally followed Yang Chendong's lead. As long as it was the young master's order, he would completely carry it out, never caring whether it was right or wrong. Therefore, at this moment, he smiled and clenched his fists. There was a creaking sound as he stretched his muscles and bones. Tiger's main strength was originally on par with Beta Persei. One was agile and the other was strong. However, Beta Persei's fists were really not to be trifled with. Once he got hit, it would definitely not feel good. Unless it was a battle of life and death, Tiger's mane would usually be at a disadvantage in a contest like this.